Here's the allspice, which is coming in really nicely. It's unfortunate that you can't just like smell through the videos because it smells awesome just standing next to it. The Lemon Bay rum tree, which essentially took an entire year off as far as growing, but you can see all the new growth on it finally. All these new leaves which smell like lemon and some kind of rum scent. It's just amazing. Here's our African tulip tree, which was the grafted yellow, which died off in the cold and then started to grow from the rootstock and had essentially turned into a bush, and finally decided to cut it back and pick a leader and make it a tree again, and it's doing really well. This will probably be flowering this summer again. Behind that, which is close to, maybe 8.5, maybe 9 feet tall at this point. This is our Cacopo banana. This is the first one that I put in after the freeze. Fastest fruiting banana of any variety. It's about 6 weeks from the time the inflorescence comes out to get fruit from it, ready to harvest. And it's also grown exceptionally fast. This was about 5 feet or so when I put it in March. There's our yellow Tacoma, or golden Tacoma, kind of like a vining shrub bush. Actually, there's our first flower in a while, but it has grown huge, as it was about the same size as this when we put it in about 3 months ago. There's our yellow shrimp plant, which we have a white in the back and just got a red today. And our Justicia, yellow and white here. Kind of taking a little bit of a hiatus, but as the rains have come in, this will be blooming and growing quite a bit over the next couple months. There's our Barbados cherry, which did not do anything for an entire year after we put it in last season. I think mainly because of the cold, but lots of blooms all over the place. I had my first cherry the other day, which was spectacular. Very much like almost like a northern cherry. Big, super rich in vitamin C. Kind of tastes like a Bing with just a little bit more flavor to it. There we go. Pretty blooms, very small. Have not had many cherries considering how many blooms we've had, but I think we're about to have a lot this season. This is our star fruit, or carambola. It's a Fwang tongue variety, which actually had fruit when we got it last, I guess late fall. Had a few fruits from it before the cold came in, which devastated this tree, but as you can see, it's come back pretty nicely, and hoping we get a bunch of fruit this summer from it, which would be nice. Here's our Grumichama, basically a Brazilian cherry, Amazon kind of a fruit. Grows in the Amazon River, loves water. Couldn't water this thing enough. It's grown a good amount, but we're, I would say, probably still a couple years out from getting fruit on this one. But if I'm lucky enough, I'll keep going to the botanical gardens and grabbing some off their tree, which is quite large. Here's our blue Java banana, which I was really worried about losing last February in the freeze here. And it did die back a bit, but has grown pretty well. I actually insulated this with a very thick blanket around the pseudo stem, which is the trunk essentially, coming up there, and it did fairly well, but basically took a year off from fruiting. Got a baby coming up. I'm gonna get all this grass out of here, which I already did here, there was tons of it, but hopefully this summer we'll get some fruit from that guy here. Lots of dwarf Cavendish. Unfortunately lost my Huamua, which was right here, which was a Hawaiian plantain, but I think maybe that is another one. This is my King's Mantle, which is like a violet flower bush, just starting to grow nicely. Took a little while since it gets a lot of sun here but seems to be doing well, and we'll probably have it flowering again in the next month or so. The papayas, which melted in the cold and have come back strong because they're essentially full-size trees. So they're not going anywhere, but they'll take a season off from fruiting. And the rest of our plantains and mainly dwarf Cavendish bananas over here, which again will probably take the next at least 6 months before we get fruit. So by the time they start to fruit, might get to winter again. So these will be next season that we get most of our bananas from, except for that guy and that guy. Here's our Cuban lime, or kind of like store lime, regular limes, which did really poorly the first couple years we were here because of all of the leaf borer, but they have done really well the last season and have lots of limes to harvest here. We also have a Kiefer lime there, which has also done quite well since we took care of it. But looking forward to picking some of these guys very soon. This is our Viejo variety Meme tree, which is a really unique fruit. Takes about 18 months to mature, so it's quite a long cycle to get fruit from something like this once you actually have it on the tree. And they are exceptionally, this one looks pretty good. They're exceptionally sensitive to the cold. They do not like temperatures under 50 degrees and really hate temperatures under 40, and will die in any kind of freeze. Thankfully, even with our hard freeze, with this bagged and a bunch of hand warmers inside for a little residual warmth, we've got a good amount of growth on this. This is a pretty rare winter variety that you can get fruit kind of off-season from. This was developed in Pine Island area. Most of these you're going to get fruit in the summer, but it's nice to have something that gives you some off-season fruit with this. Here's kind of our pride and joy. This is a Valencia Pride mango tree. Quite mature, as you can see. Very large. We've got a lot of mosquitoes and no-see-ums right now, so I apologize. But we're probably looking at a 22-foot tall tree or so, which needs a heavy pruning after this fruiting is over. You can see some beautiful fruit on there. That classic Valencia shape as opposed to the round shape. We have dozens and dozens and dozens, probably over the last 2 months, over 100 mangoes on the ground from the way that this season went with the freeze. But thankfully still quite a few that are on the tree. And this is kind of like a late season variety, so we're at least a month out, but starting to get pretty close. As you can see, they're starting to ripen a little bit. They're a good size. We get some weird, what the hell is that? Some freak mangoes. And we're kind of on the south side here, so mangoes that see a little bit more sun regularly, which are ripening just a little bit quicker, but they're all over the tree. So we'll have probably a few hundred mangoes by the end of August with these. And they are one of the best you can possibly get once they're perfectly ripe. Definitely one of my favorite varieties that I've had. Here's a relatively new in the ground tree here, but something I've had in a pot for a while because I had a good amount of fruit when I got it. This is a cherry of the Rio Grande, and pretty leaves, cool looking bark, really tasty fruit, delicious, and pretty large, so you get a good amount of flesh and juice and something like that, and very easy to grow. Show you a couple of the smaller things. Partly because of the freeze last year, this would have been probably at least 50% bigger than this had it not been under 30 for 4 days here. But this is a black sapote grafted. Not sure if this is a named cultivar or just a grafted black sapote, but this is a chocolate pudding fruit tree. Really, really tasty, but we are at least a couple years away from fruit on that, probably more. Over here we have a brown turkey fig, which we put in about the same time as that guy over there, and a little bit bigger as it was in dormancy when the freeze came in, so it wasn't as affected quite so bad. We did lose some fruit from it, but it wasn't hurt so bad in its growth cycle, so it's doing pretty well. And I would assume, have some decent amount of fruit from this guy this season. Our purple Thai sugarcane is really taken off. It's quite large at this point. This has been in this box for about 3 months and 4 months old altogether. Got a couple marigolds in there that we've had just to kind of keep pests out, which are nearing the end of its life cycle. So we'll put more in there shortly. Here's our cinnamon apple tree, which is a pretty rare tropical fruit. Most people have never heard of it and certainly never eaten one. I have not eaten one, and it will probably be at least a couple years before I do. But considering how rare they are to even find, never mind have the plant, I'm pretty happy to have this in our yard. Here's our fruit punch mango, which fruited last year decently, but had quite a bit of rust and scale. The last freeze basically nearly killed it. It was actually bleeding sap from the trunk, which is as close you can get to a guaranteed death as possible. And whoever had put this in had planted this probably 3 inches too deep in the ground, so the roots weren't doing too well, and in the couple hurricanes we had and the freeze, it really just did a number on this tree. So we've tried to revive it, got rid of all the bacteria that it had as far as the infection in the tree itself, dug out about 3 inches of ground here, and have slowly started propping it up to get it a little bit more vertical, as it was almost at 45 degrees when it was defoliated. And it's starting to do quite a bit better. We've had a lot of foliage come back. The leaves are, for the most part, quite healthy. You can see there's still a little bit of stuff it's going through, but considering that's what every single leaf was, and this was a good one probably 3 months ago, it's doing quite well. And the fruit punch mango is delicious, so we're looking forward to having this one come back. Probably one of the wildest trees we have in the yard here is our moringa, which you can tell from the size of the trunk here was quite mature and had really not been pruned and taken care of much when we had moved in. So we started grooming it a little bit, and then this February, I guess, when the freeze came in, it was recommended to basically harvest everything we could off of it, as it would not take the freeze well, but it will guaranteed come back. And I chopped it off right there, and as you can see, it has come back amazingly well. This tree at this point is close to 15 feet tall, and I cut it right around 4 feet, so it has grown close to 11 feet since February. This is our macadamia tree, which was here before we had moved in and didn't do anything for the first 2 years we were here. This year it actually shot out inflorescence and thought maybe we would get fruit or the nuts from it. And so far we have not. But I'm going to give it another year or so. Apparently it's pretty hard to get fruit from these. Even if they produce the fruit, often they are taken by squirrels or birds before they actually mature. So I'm going to give it another couple years and see what happens with this one, but this is probably a tree that is a candidate to be replaced by something else. But it's got pretty cool leaves and is a decent size. So if it grows fast enough and doesn't produce, I might still leave this as a canopy tree. This is our red finger lime tree, one of the newly developed University of Florida disease-resistant to greening citrus trees, which is one of the reasons that I actually put this in, because although we have a good amount of citrus here, we've not added any since we moved here a little over 2 years ago, because Florida has an issue with a disease from a certain bug that is called greening, which essentially kills a tree and has no treatment to it. So there's been a huge loss of citrus farms altogether, mainly oranges, but it affects all of the citrus. And until this, which is pretty recent, they've come out with this. There's really not been anything that resists that disease. So this is a finger lime tree and should be something that is not affected by the citrus greening disease, which has been prevalent for the last couple decades here. He is one of our first plants that we got, I guess a tree, a gardenia, given to us by good friends of ours, Bill and Anna, when we first moved into the house. And it was extremely unhappy in the first place that I planted it, mainly because I had zero clue what I was doing. And although gardenias like heat, they do not like direct sunlight, especially when they're new. So after repotting it from the ground for about an entire year, it came back, did quite well, and I eventually put it in this spot, which is between these two pine trees. I'm sorry, one pine tree, one palm tree, and then my large mango tree behind it, and a couple other palms, giving this a healthy amount of dappled sun through the kind of the hot point of the day. Certainly anytime after 1 o'clock, this is not getting the brunt of the sun, but gets a fair amount of direct sun the first half of the day, so it's kind of in its perfect spot. Gardenias also like an acidic soil, so they actually do better in a pot than they do in the kind of alkaline soil that Florida naturally has. And now that it's here with an open bottom, it can continue to root into the ground after it really gets established. And at some point, this guy will be pushing out to the two trees on either side of it. Here's our Alano sapodilla tree. When we had moved in here 2 years ago, which was 2 years ago in June, this was covered in black powdery mold or sooty mold, and I had no idea what a sapodilla tree was, so this weird looking fruit on a tree that the leaves were literally completely black, I looked at and thought, what is this? We might as well take this out and put something that I know what it is in here. But eventually I was able to figure out what it was, and with mainly neem oil, bring it back from the complete infestation of sooty mold that it had on it. And as you can see now, it's quite happy, quite healthy. There's fruit all over the place. Alanos are really, really sweet and tasty, but they're a little bit smaller fruit. This is probably about half the size that it will be when it's fully mature. And at least here on this tree, we're probably maybe a month or so from them being ready to harvest and ready to eat. The lower fruits can sometimes get affected by ants sitting on them and building up a little bit of dirt, essentially, as they try to do their thing on there. But we've got quite a few fruit on here that are close to harvest. This guy here, I've been scratching, as you can see. And when you scratch one of these, if it shows a orange or brown, it's pretty much ready to harvest. And if you get a green like that, you're not quite there. So that fruit's going to be the first one ready to go, and I would assume not too long, a couple of weeks. Here's another sapodilla tree. This is actually a different variety called butterscotch. And although the Alano we have here, this is a mature tree that we had before we moved in. This is actually one that we put in this summer. And there's some fruit on it. These will be much larger. Some mealy crap with ants eating it. This will be much larger fruit than the Alano has on it. The Alano tends to produce more fruit. You can see tons of fruit on that. This is something that is not quite as prolific, but you can see it's got quite a few flowers all over the place. So it can still make a good amount of fruit, but the tendency on this is to hold less of it, comparatively at least, than the Alano would. But these fruit will be palm size, so 3 to 4 times the size of the Alanos. A little bit sweeter, or at least could be, should be a little bit sweeter. But we'll have our first couple of fruit to try at some point at the end of this year, and greatly looking forward to see how these taste, as the Alanos are delicious, but these should be even better. Here's our raw sapote tree, which is essentially a egg fruit or canistel, yellow sapote, lots of different names for the same thing. This is somewhat unique to the Canistel variety. Still doing pretty good. In that it has a slightly juicier flesh to it instead of more of a dry kind of, think like hard-boiled egg for a Canistel interior. This has just a little bit more juice to it, but the same sweet taste. Really, really, really nice. Very sweet, subtle without being sharp in any way. It's not an acidic fruit. It's hard to describe, but unique and really, really tasty. Here's our green Malayan coconut palm. It's a new addition. It's not a whole lot of palms we've put in since we've been here, since not all of them do any kind of fruit that you can eat, but this certainly produces fruit. It's a green coconut and has a really cool looking frond to it. Somewhat unique in comparison to the standard cabbage and sable palms that we have all over the yard. Nice looking tree. This is kind of our white sapote section of the yard. This is a decent size Redlands variety, which flowered at least last season, but the cold took the fruit off of it. But this is definitely at the size that it will fruit, so hoping this year we get some flowers again from this and actually get fruit from it next season. Next to it, which is part of the reason for cross-pollination and just getting more fruit, this is a Smathers variety of white sapote as well. Going to bring that stalk up a little bit to get it straightened out a little bit as it's reaching for the morning sun here. And then a much smaller little baby, but has already flowered, not fruited, Densler variety of white sapote. And this little trio of trees will greatly help fruit production and just the quality of the fruit and the amount of fruit that you'll get from each tree, having 3 of them in a very close distance. Here we have a pretty unique fruit tree. It's called a peanut butter fruit, and although it has no relation to peanuts whatsoever, the mature fruit tastes very much like natural peanut butter, and if you have it at the most mature, there's just a hint of berry to it as well, and it's almost like just a little bit of smidgen peanut butter and jelly kind of a flavor, but very, very peanut butter-like. Cool looking leaves. This was a large tree, and you can see here from what was cut back, quite a bit was cut back. Unfortunately, the multiple cold spells that we got, one 4-day freeze and then a couple additional low 40 temperature fronts that came through, took that guy down. But coming back nicely, and since it's not a grafted tree, not too worried about it growing back from the rootstock there. Here's our white shrimp flower, which has grown unbelievably well. This is literally planted in an old palm tree that was cut down, and the original trunk that is in there was kind of hollowed out, filled with dirt. Put this thing in there, and the last cranberry hibiscus I had in here did reasonably well until the cold killed it, and then this thing has just taken off ever since. Background over here, you've got a China jackfruit, basically kind of a hybrid between a champadoc and jackfruit. Kind of gets the best of both worlds. Our original black gold jackfruit, I at least thought had died off in the cold. Pulled it out after a couple months of bleeding sap and nothing coming out. Put it in our side yard, and after getting this guy here and replacing the original jackfruit with a big red custard apple, it came back in my side yard. So this is now our bonus fruit, and someday we'll have both the China and black gold variety of jackfruit available. Here is one of the 2 red kapok trees in the yard, and this has really beautiful flowers in the winter time after it defoliates. And the first year we had hurricanes kind of interrupt that cycle, and then this year we had the freeze interrupt that cycle, but has produced quite a bit of flowers on it. We had hundreds of buds that froze, unfortunately, and fell off, but this is going to be a tree that really has no issue growing as it's so mature. This is a branch. There's the original trunk, which is probably 4 feet around, that had toppled over years and years and years ago. And these side shoots were branches that eventually turned into the now trunks of the tree, and the tree is enormous. Here are our regular coconut palms here, kind of our standard coconut palms, which were planted well before we moved in. And that guy right there actually had 2 inflorescence with a bunch of coconuts on it this year that the cold fortunately took away from us. They take, I want to say, close to a year, a little under a year to actually ripen and mature, and they were probably 4 months in, so it was a bummer to lose those. But these trees, at least this guy, this year we'll have more fruit from. This guy is within a year or so, probably within 2 years, and the same thing with that guy in the end. So these will all grow pretty quickly over the summer and then start to be at the point where they could potentially start to give us coconuts within a year or less here. Here is our Nagami kumquat tree, which just flowered maybe 2 weeks ago, and you can see there are fruit finally that have set and held now for over a week, so we're probably going to get the majority of these here, which they're all over the tree, so there'll be tons of delicious kumquats to eat off of this guy. There's some starting to actually get a little bit bigger within the next month here. We've got a few milkweeds in the yard for butterflies, but this one's pretty unique because it's essentially a tree. As it matures, it is huge. See the size of it in comparison to my hand here. This is the giant milkweed. Hey, buddy. And this is something that has, there we go. Exactly what I was looking for. One specific caterpillar which turns into one specific butterfly that essentially devours this plant. But it is around specifically for this guy to feed on and become the eventually beautiful butterfly that it will become. And it will just continue to get larger and larger and larger. This will become a large shrub. Here's our pink guava tree, which has just began refoliating as it defoliated its old leaves, has grown new leaves, and will just start to produce, as you can start to see here, new flower buds, which will eventually turn into fruit. Nice, delicious pink, really delicious smelling and tasting fruit. There's a couple, thankfully, right there. Over the summer here, and we had a huge harvest last season. It was devastated by the hurricanes the first year. You can see the damage to the tree there. And also had quite a bit of sooty mold, black mildew, mealybug, I mean basically everything, whitefly on this, and we brought it back a couple times and it's starting to do quite well. We'll have a good amount of fruit this summer from it. Here for the most part it's kind of a decorative section of the yard. We've got some Dressiana, some weeping bottle brush, which has some new blooms on it. We'll let that get, this is a dwarf variety, so we're going to get this maybe 2 or 3 feet higher and then let it start to actually weep down, but until then we got to let that become kind of a leader. Some red lady cordyline, kind of a standard for Florida. Some agamanthum, pretty blooms on it. Some Sanchisia, which took a full season to be happy and definitely did not like the cold, but has come back strong. Some basic Petra crotons. A Zanzibar croton. And a nice, beautiful, blooming chirimoya, green or white custard apple. Delicious, delicious fruit. Flowering right there. Hopefully we get some fruit from it this season. And this is one of our decorative areas in the rear yard. Here's our rear decorative area that also has 2 tamarind trees. I believe both the tart variety, but they are quite tasty. This one's starting to get all the new leaves in. This one's still loaded with a bunch of tamarind and starting to defoliate, but we'll get a bunch of new leaves coming up soon. A couple basil plants that we put in just as a more of a pest preventative than anything else. A dwarf powder puff bush. Mango croton, which is doing quite well. nice and happy. And then unfortunately a Pinocchio croton that could not take the afternoon sun here in the summer months. Here's our other mature mango tree, which is almost as large as the Valencia Pride, needs even more of a pruning than it, and has quite a few fruit on it, as you can see. We've got our first fruit that we harvested today, and I'm not exactly sure which variety this tree is. This is actually from the early bloom that we had this year, which was kind of strange. There we go. This could potentially be a coconut cream, but we're not quite sure yet. Delicious fruit. This is our seedling Hong Kong orchid that a friend of ours, Jenny, gave to Kathy, and was looking a little rickety, but we've repotted it and babied it for a little while, and it's come back quite nicely. So someday this will be a pretty pink flowering orchid tree like the one we've got in the front yard. And the Queen's Wreath or Pentas vine. This was attacked by aphids after putting it in, of course. There's just nothing that doesn't have something that it has to deal with. But is slowly coming back healthily and starting to produce nicely, and I would imagine by next year is already up by the top of that palm and flowering purple flowers all over the place. Behind these 4 palms, we've got our braided money tree, which we got from Costco of all places, and is usually just kind of a decorative indoor thing. But these will actually produce very tasty nuts, quite large. They take some time to get to the point where they're ready to do that, but it's a really cool looking tree. And this will probably be right about there as far as height by the time it's ready to produce nuts, and then only a little bit taller by the time it's fully mature. Out in the side woods here, everything's beginning to jungle out very quickly, but have some bromeliads that are happy out here. Have these wild sour orange trees which are growing like crazy, and then this large one which has fruit all over it. Actually some pretty large things up there, and these will probably be ready later this year, but all over this tree. I think there's about a dozen fruit on it. Another one here, another one there. We'll have to thin these out to some extent. We've got native beautyberry growing all over the place, which produces a bright purple berry, which is edible and has a little bit of a sweet flavor to it, but mostly for a jam kind of a thing, not for just regular eating. The large Suriname cherries, which produce some fruit for sure this year, but didn't eat too much because we had better stuff to eat. Going in this direction, things are definitely starting to fill in quite a bit with ferns and these horrendous invasive potato vines like this that I've pulled out hundreds already. Here's another one that has literally in days wrapped around this. That's a beautyberry as well. Let me pull that out of the ground. Let that tree hopefully come back a little bit. And then here's the black gold jackfruit that I really thought was dead, but it just felt too solid to throw away completely. So I stuck in the ground and did nothing with for a few months, and there it is growing. Additionally, in the side woods, we have this mini monstera that had broken off from the pot I have with all my other plants, and basically just stuck it in the palm and has done quite well, doing what it's supposed to do, grabbing onto a tree as an epiphyte, not a parasite, so it doesn't do anything harmful to it, and uses that to climb and will eventually someday be all the way at the top of that, reaching out to the sun. Our ring of fire philodendron, which has gone just absolutely ballistic. See people online that are like, oh look, I got 2 new leaves this year. This isn't even 2 years old. And this crazy caladium. So cool looking. Petrocroton, prayer flower, white knight philodendron. This is actually, oh God, what do you call it? Patchouli, the actual bush. And these things have rooted but have not shown any leaves yet, but this should be an actual bush too. Wandering Jew? No offense to anybody. I don't know the actual name to it, but that's what they call them. Devil's backbone. A Japanese tree fern. This fern will be 8-10 feet tall eventually with huge fronds. Very cool looking. Nice seedling croton from a buddy named Mark Roberg. Actually, this one is called Christie, so this is not a seedling. This is a grafted tree, or a named variety at least. A form of jade, some white Java, copperleaf. Really cool looking. My rubber tree cuttings, which I got from a friend named Bob Lubin, and dug out a few decent sized trees and some cuttings that he had done, which have all rooted and done quite well. Hopefully another God, why can't I think of it? Patchouli, like this again. We'll see. Irene Kingsley croton. Another Petra, which will all get planted eventually, of course. These are all kind of the on-deck things. This was from Mom's house. This is just I'm not even sure the name of it, honestly. I can't think of the name of this thing offhand. But that is something I'll pop in the tree, and it will turn into one of these orchids over here at some point. I have no idea what color it will be, but something kind of like one of these guys. We've got a bunch in the trees, obviously. I don't think this guy's flowered, so I'm not sure what variety that is, but some kind of orchid. Here are 3 different dragon fruit that I got in from Top Tropicals. Let's see, a yellow dragon, different variety of yellow. I think that's the best tasting of the fruits that I've had, at least. This one's called Halley's Comet. This is a pink on the outside, pink flesh on the inside, dark, very sweet fruit. And then this somewhat unique, pretty rare, I would say, gardenia. This is a Tahitian gardenia. And there's theoretically only one variety of gardenia that really does well down here, but if you get some super rare tropicals, there are probably 3 or 4 that do quite well, and that's one of them. Here we have a Pleroma ervillianum, or a princess flower, which I actually bought, I don't know, maybe 3 months ago, and for whatever reason did not do well in the yard, but it's a really cool looking bush. So I got one more of them, hoping this one does well. It's supposed to take full sun and a little bit of shade. Our last one had mostly sun and maybe didn't like the soil, but this will have nice purple violet flowers. You can see one of the buds coming out right there. And will grow actually a decent size, probably 6 to 8 feet tall and 10 feet wide. Here we have Annabelle right next to a bleeding heart vine, which you can see the red flower with the white bracts, I guess, or calyx. And this vine is a kind of like a partial shade, somewhat full sun morning kind of a thing, so we're finding a good spot for it, but a very cool looking vine. Here's our biggest Jabatacoba. This is a red variety, 45 gallon. Fruited once so far. Actually, probably a couple times, I guess. It fruited once for us. Hold on one, baby. Fruited once for us and a couple times for the previous owner before it came to us. And is doing really well. This is a very rare Restinga variety of the same tree. This is also a Jabotacaba. This guy here is actually a miracle fruit, which we've got a few berries from for the first time, and there is flowers all over the tree, so we'll start to get some really cool flowers which produce a berry that literally makes acidic and sour fruit taste exceptionally sweet. So a very, very unique plant. Coming over to another Jabatacoba. This is a Grimmel variety, one of two that we've got. One of the younger ones, actually. This is a yellow, which is also one of two that we have. We have almost two of each Jabo plant variety, at least that we own. That's a red hybrid. Here's a Patomba fruit, red lipstick palm, which will be red corms or trunks as that gets larger. That's a relatively young one. These are kind of slow growing, at least for palms at least, and very cool. Monstera deliciosa with some happy soil mushrooms growing. All kinds of cool stuff in the side of the pool here. Some crotons, pencil cactus, philodendron, Texas sage, some passion fruit down there. There's a moringa plant. There's just all kinds of things in the side of the pool here. Here's Annabelle's garden with a good-sized tomato plant in there. We've got some vinca flowers, actually a flowering coleus. Annabelle planted this seed, which is some kind of Suriname cherry. We're not sure exactly what it is yet, but we'll just kind of let that thing grow. And for now, at least, that's what we've got in here. But this is mainly going to be for the tomato plant that we've got here. Right, Annabelle? Here's some more of our larger Jabo plants, the Jaboticobas. This is a Sabra. They call this either the black or the purple. This is probably the most common variety. Really, really good tasting fruit. And these are a cauliflower, which means that the fruit actually comes off of the trunk of the tree as opposed to hanging off of branches. Here's another Grimmel. It's just a little bit larger one. Grimmel is from the Grimmel Grove down in the Keys. This was a variety that produces a gigantic berry, close to the size of almost like 3/4 or half size of a kiwi. And it's the taste-wise, it's like the sweetest grape you've ever eaten. So really, really delicious. And then the red variety, which of these three here will probably be the first fruiting, as these fruit the earliest. And you can tell once the tree starts to peel like this pretty regularly, it starts beginning the fruiting cycle pretty quickly after that. And this guy will be fruiting, I would say, this year. Here's the second yellow that we have. And we've tried this tree in a few different areas, including where those sea grape are that I cut down and coming back. And one of the things that you're always trying to do is find out where something is going to grow the best and where it's happiest in the yard. And right now this red is providing some afternoon shade for this yellow that gets just the perfect amount. So this has been the happy spot for this guy for the last month and a half or so.